Do-hyun Lee had always been the calm one, quiet, brilliant, and the kind of man who could fix a machine faster than he could hold a conversation with a woman. At 28, he was a rising software engineer at his friend's multinational tech company, Jumatech, owned by none other than Jumapalai Mwangi, his childhood best friend from Nairobi. They met as kids when Jumapalai's diplomat father was stationed in Seoul. While other kids teased her for her accent and curly hair, Do-hyun had been the one to share his lunch and draw little comic sketches to make her laugh. She never forgot that boy, and neither did he forget the bright girl who could outsmart him in math by the age of 9. But time passed. She became a CEO, confident and magnetic, commanding rooms full of men twice her age. And he became the quiet genius behind her company's coding empire. One chilly spring evening, Do-hyun entered her glass-walled office, his heart pounding. "Juma," he began, his voice awkward. "I need a favor." She leaned back, amused. "The last time you said that, you made me pretend to be your sister, so your mom would stop nagging you about marriage. This is worse," he sighed. "I need you to teach me how to attract women." Her laughter filled the office like sunlight through glass. "Excuse me? You're beautiful," he said sincerely, making her blink. "You know how to carry yourself, how to talk, how to make people like you. I'm not good at this. I want to learn." For the first time in years, Jumapalai didn't have a witty comeback. His words struck somewhere between flattery and heartbreak. "You want me to help you flirt?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Exactly. Be my coach." And against her better judgment, she agreed. They met every evening after work. Training sessions, he called them. But what Jumapalai didn't expect was how natural he looked when he smiled genuinely, or how her heart skipped when his gaze lingered a little too long. One night, while practicing flirting through body language, Do-hyun leaned closer, his deep brown eyes warm but uncertain. "Am I doing it right?" "You're very close," she stammered, her pulse racing. "That's part of the lesson, isn't it?" he teased softly. Her breath hitched. For the first time, she realized the student was no longer just learning. He was unintentionally charming her. Weeks passed. Every lesson felt less like practice and more like something real. When he laughed, she laughed. When he brushed her hair from her face during a mock date, her heart betrayed her completely. Yet Jumapalai refused to acknowledge it. "He's my friend," she told herself. "He's just learning." But one rainy evening, as they shared an umbrella while walking home, Do-hyun said something that shattered her composure. "You know, Juma, every time I try to imagine the kind of woman I want to attract, I end up describing you." The rain fell harder, but silence was louder. Her hand trembled in his. "Don't say things like that, Do-hyun," she whispered. "You're just confused." "No," he said softly, stepping closer. "For the first time, I'm not confused." She looked up at him, droplets glistening on her lashes. His sincerity cut through every wall she'd built as a CEO, as a woman who feared love might ruin everything she'd worked for. He leaned down slowly, hesitant, reverent, and kissed her forehead. "You've already taught me how to attract a beautiful woman," he murmured. "Now I just need to learn how to make her stay." After that night, everything changed. Their office glances grew longer, their after-hours meetings softer, filled with unspoken tenderness. She tried to keep things professional, but love is not a thing that obeys rules. Do-hyun began bringing her coffee with handwritten notes. Lesson 9. How to make a CEO smile before her meeting. She'd find little sticky notes on her desk. Homework. Think of one reason you should give me a real date. Finally, one Friday she gave in. They went to Namsan Tower, their childhood spot. As they locked a small padlock on the railing, she confessed, her voice trembling. "You were supposed to learn how to love someone else, Do-hyun." "I did," he said, eyes soft as dawn. "You taught me, by being the one I can't stop loving." Months later, Jumapalai found herself no longer teaching lessons, but living them. They worked side by side, laughed endlessly, and built something deeper than friendship. When he finally proposed, it wasn't in grand style. It was simple, just the two of them on the office rooftop, city lights glowing below. "You were my teacher, Juma," he said, holding her hand. "But what I really learned was that love isn't about attraction. It's about finding the one person who makes you feel enough." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then let's never stop learning together." And as he kissed her under Seoul's shimmering night, it wasn't the kiss of a student or a friend, but of a man who had finally mastered the most difficult lesson of all. The morning after Do-hyun's quiet proposal felt like a dream Jumapali didn't want to wake from. Her heart, once guarded behind polished confidence and boardroom power, now beat softly. For him, she had spent years running a company, managing crises, and making impossible decisions. But now, her only decision was whether to hold his hand first or let him hold hers. They were engaged, and for the first time in their years of friendship, the space between them was filled not with lessons, but love. They kept their engagement private for a while, just for themselves. After work, Do-hyun would pick her up quietly, and they would escape to small corners of Seoul where no one knew who they were. A noodle shop in Myeongdong, a quiet garden near the Han River, a bookstore cafe that smelled like coffee and poetry. One evening, Jumapali rested her head on his shoulder as they sat watching city lights reflect off the water. "You know," she murmured, "you used to be the boy who couldn't even look a woman in the eye. And now," he teased softly, "now you're the man who can make me forget the world with just one look." He smiled, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "That's because my world is you, Juma." The simplicity of his words melted her. He wasn't poetic or dramatic, but every word he said carried truth, sincerity, and love. Their wedding wasn't grand, but it was beautiful. Held in a private garden on Jeju Island, the ceremony mixed their two cultures, Korean elegance with Kenyan color. Her gown flowed like soft ivory silk. His hanbok was deep blue, trimmed with gold. The air smelled of ocean breeze and jasmine. As she walked toward him, her heart fluttered. Every step was a promise that she would love the boy who once hid behind silence and now stood tall for her. When the vows came, Do-hyun's voice trembled. "You were the friend who saw me when no one else did. You believed I could be more. You taught me courage, confidence, and love. I don't promise perfection, Juma. I promise devotion, every single day." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she whispered back, "You were the boy who made me laugh when I was lonely, and the man who made me believe love could be gentle. My heart is your home now, Do-hyun." And when they kissed, the crowd cheered, but to them the world fell silent. All that existed was the warmth between their lips and the certainty that their hearts had finally arrived home. Their honeymoon took them to Zanzibar, Jumapali's childhood dream. The beach stretched endlessly, waves whispering against the sand like music meant just for lovers. Every morning, Do-hyun would wake before her, not to work, but to watch her sleep. He would trace invisible patterns on her fingers and whisper, "I still can't believe you're mine." She'd open her eyes, smiling lazily. "You're supposed to wake me with a kiss, not a stare." "Then," he'd whisper, leaning closer, "let me correct that." Their days were filled with laughter, teasing, and small tender moments. Sunlit breakfasts, walks along the shore, and late-night talks under stars that seemed to dance for them. One night, as they lay together on the balcony, ocean breeze wrapping around them, Jumapali spoke softly. "I used to think love was a distraction, something that made strong people weak." Do-hyun took her hand, pressing it against his chest. "And now I think love makes strong people softer, and that's even more powerful." He kissed her fingertips, his eyes glowing with affection. "Then let's never stop being soft for each other." Back in Seoul, life wasn't always sunsets and beaches. There were meetings, deadlines, and long nights, but their love became the quiet constant that carried them through. Every morning, Do-hyun made her tea just the way she liked, with honey instead of sugar. Every evening, she dropped by his office to steal 1 minute of peace in his arms before facing the world again. They found romance in the ordinary, sharing an umbrella in the rain, leaving notes on each other's desks, dancing barefoot in the living room to songs they didn't even know the words to. Sometimes, she'd catch him staring, not with hunger, but with tenderness that melted her from the inside out. "What are you thinking?" she'd ask, cheeks warm. "That I asked you to teach me how to attract beautiful women," he'd reply, smiling. "But all I learned was how to love one." Years later, Dohayan and Jamapalai would still call each other teacher and student. It was their inside joke, their way of remembering where it all began. When she'd scold him for forgetting dinner plans, he'd grin, and every night before they fell asleep, Dohayan would pull her close, whispering the same promise he'd made years ago. "You taught me everything I know about love, Juma, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I learned well." The night air in Seoul carried a cool whisper of autumn. Inside their penthouse, soft golden light filled the living room. Gentle, quiet, and wrapped in the rhythm of two hearts that had learned to beat together. Jamapalai sat by the window, her hair loose, eyes lost in the glitter of the city below. Dohayan came behind her, silent as the evening, and rested his hands on her shoulders. His touch was light, like the brush of memory, but it sent a wave of calm through her. "You've been working all day again," he murmured. "I had to finish the proposal," she said softly. "But I missed you the whole time." He smiled, leaning closer until his chin rested near her hair. "Then that makes two of us." For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside kept moving. Cars, lights, life, but inside, time slowed. He turned her chair gently to face him, kneeling down so their eyes met. "You know, Juma," he said, his voice deep and quiet, "every day I think I've reached the limit of how much I can love you, and then I see you again, like this, and I realize I was wrong." Her breath trembled. She reached out, tracing his jaw with her fingertips, feeling the warmth of his skin under her touch. "You make love sound like something alive," she whispered. "That's because it is," he said. "It breathes every time you smile." Later that night, soft music played in the background, an old jazz record spinning lazily. Jamapalai was pouring tea when Dohayan extended his hand toward her. "Dance with me," he said. She laughed. "Here? Now?" "Always," he replied. And so, in the middle of their living room, barefoot and smiling, they began to dance. No audience, no stage, just two people wrapped in moonlight. He held her close, his hand resting at the small of her back, her head resting against his shoulder. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, the rhythm that had become her favorite song. "Remember when you used to count steps?" she teased. "Not anymore," he whispered. "Now I just follow your heart." The music faded, but they didn't stop. They swayed in silence, eyes closed, as if afraid that letting go would wake them from a beautiful dream. Their romance wasn't built on grand gestures. It was woven through ordinary things. How he tucked her hair behind her ear before breakfast. How she left little notes in his pockets before meetings. How they always found each other's hand, even in silence. One evening, rain began to fall, steady and soft. Jamapalai sat by the open balcony, watching droplets slide down the railing. Dohayan came up behind her, wrapping a blanket around both of them. "You always chase storms," he said gently. "Because rain reminds me of us," she answered. "We started quietly, and then we just kept falling." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then let's never stop falling, my love." As months turned into years, their love deepened like old wine. Richer, softer, more patient. Some nights they'd stay awake, talking until dawn. Dreams, fears, laughter. Nothing was too small to share. When she felt overwhelmed, he didn't try to fix her problems. He simply held her hand and listened. When he doubted himself, she reminded him that love had already made him strong. One night, as they lay together under warm sheets, she whispered, "Do you think love can last forever?" He looked at her, eyes gentle, voice sure. "It already has. It just changed its form from friendship to lessons to this. Every version of us was love." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the pure weight of what they had built. She pressed her palm against his heart. Then promise me one thing, she whispered. Anything. That no matter how old we get, we'll keep teaching each other how to love. He smiled softly, his hand closing over hers. That's one lesson I'll never stop learning. Years later, long after their hair had begun to turn silver, Dohayan still woke early to make her tea. Jumapali still smiled when he hummed off-key songs while fixing breakfast. And every anniversary they returned to the same spot by the Han River, where she first taught him how to talk to women. He would look at her, eyes full of the same tenderness that once made her heart stumble. You remember what I told you back then? He asked. She laughed. Do you want to learn how to attract beautiful women? Yes, he said, his hand finding hers. And you're still the only one who ever said yes to being my teacher. She leaned against him, smiling through tears. And you're still the best student I ever had. The river glimmered under the setting sun, and their fingers intertwined. Still, always. As two hearts that had turned a single lesson into a lifetime of love. The morning the world changed began quietly. Dohayan woke before sunrise, the soft light of dawn spilling across the bedroom floor. Beside him, Jumapali slept with one hand resting protectively on the gentle curve of her belly. He watched her for a long time, breathing in the peace that had settled around them like a promise. A small smile touched his lips as he whispered, "Good morning, my two favorite people." She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "You're talking to my stomach again?" she teased, voice still heavy with sleep. "Of course," he said, placing a kiss just above her navel. "I have to let our little one know how loved they already are." She reached out, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You're going to be the kindest father, Dohayan. Only because I learned from the best teacher," he said softly, meeting her gaze. And just like that, another morning turned into a moment they'd never forget. Pregnancy didn't stop Jumapali from running her company, though she moved a little slower and laughed a little more. Dohayan became her shadow, always one step behind, making sure she didn't forget to eat, rest, or smile. Every night he read to her belly, sometimes lullabies, sometimes poetry, sometimes stories of their own love. He said he wanted their baby to grow up surrounded by words that carried warmth. "What if they hear my voice and think I sound silly?" she asked one night. He grinned. "Then they'll know they're loved by someone beautifully silly." They painted the nursery together, soft cream walls, little clouds near the ceiling, and a mobile of stars above the crib. Dohayan hand-carved a tiny wooden elephant, and Jumapali knitted a small blanket in golden thread. "Every stitch is a prayer," she said quietly as she worked. He took her hand and kissed it. "Then every heartbeat is a thank you." It was raining the day their daughter was born. The same gentle rain that had once marked so many turning points in their lives. Jumapali's labor was long, filled with pain, sweat, and trembling hands, but Dohayan never left her side. He held her, whispered strength into her ears, and wiped her tears with shaking fingers. And when the cry finally came, that first fragile sound, both of them broke into tears. The nurse placed the tiny bundle in Jumapali's arms. The baby's eyes were small, dark, and full of mystery. "She looks like you," Dohayan whispered, his voice breaking. "No," Jumapali smiled through her tears. "She looks like love." He leaned in, wrapping both of them in his arms, his heart beating faster than it ever had before. "Welcome to our world, little one," he whispered. "We've been waiting for you." They named her Amara, meaning eternal, because that's what their love felt like now. Not a fleeting story, but something infinite. Life changed in small ways. There were sleepless nights and bottles at 3 a.m., laughter echoing through hallways, and lullabies sung half asleep. Yet, in those moments of exhaustion, they found a new rhythm, one that deepened their bond even more. Dohayan would sometimes wake to find Jumapali in the rocking chair, Amara asleep against her chest, the first light of dawn touching both their faces. He'd stand there quietly, just watching, overwhelmed by gratitude. When she noticed him, she'd whisper, "You're staring again." "I'm memorizing," he replied softly. "Every version of you. The woman I fell for, the wife I love, the mother who completes us. Sometimes, when Amara slept between them, they'd just hold hands across her little body, a silent reminder that love had found its purest form. As Amara grew, their home filled with laughter. She had her mother's curiosity and her father's gentleness. Every evening, Dohayan told her bedtime stories about a brave CEO and a shy inventor who fell in love and built a world together. Jamapalai would smile from the doorway, listening as their daughter's giggles filled the room. "You make me sound too perfect," she teased once. "I'm only telling the truth," he said, eyes warm. "How else will our daughter learn what love looks like?" Sometimes, on quiet nights after Amara was asleep, they'd sit by the window again. The same window where so many of their conversations had begun years ago. "Do you ever miss the days when it was just us?" Jamapalai asked softly. "Sometimes," Dohayan admitted. "But now, there's more of you to love." In her smile, in the way she looks at me. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You've changed my whole definition of home," she whispered. "And you've changed my definition of forever," he replied. Years later, they would tell Amara how their story began, with friendship, laughter, and one small request for help. And as she listened, eyes wide with wonder, she'd always end up saying, "So, Daddy, you fell in love because Mommy taught you how." He'd smile, glancing at Jamapalai. "Yes, Amara. She taught me everything, and I'm still learning." Then Jamapalai would laugh softly, taking both their hands in hers. "That's the secret, my love. Love isn't something you finish learning. It's something you live, every day." And in that quiet truth, in the laughter of their daughter, the warmth of their home, and the unspoken tenderness between two souls who had grown together, their love story continued. Not in grand gestures, not in perfect words, but in the gentle, everlasting rhythm of family. The years seemed to pass in whispers, soft, steady, and full of love's quiet work. Amara grew from a curious toddler into a little girl with a laugh that filled every corner of their home. Her curls bounced when she ran. Her eyes shone with questions about everything. The stars, the rain, even love. One summer morning, she sat cross-legged on the living room floor, drawing a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one with curly hair, one small in between. "That's us," she declared proudly, holding it up. "Appa, Amma, and me. You even drew our smiles," Dohayan said, taking the paper gently. "Because we're happy," she replied simply. And somehow that simple truth made both her parents pause. Because happiness wasn't loud anymore. It was a soft, daily miracle that lived in their laughter, in bedtime stories, in holding hands across years that had only made them stronger. Amara loved asking questions that made them both think. One night, while Jamapalai tucked her into bed, she asked in her sleepy voice, "Amma, how do people stay in love forever?" Jamapalai smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. "By choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." Amara frowned softly. "Do you and Appa ever stop choosing each other?" Dohayan appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a tender smile. "Never," he said. "Even when we disagree, we still hold hands before bed." Amara's little eyes blinked sleepily. "That's how you keep love safe? That's how we keep us safe," Jamapalai whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. After she drifted off, they lingered beside her bed, their hands brushing together. "She's growing so fast," Jamapalai murmured. "I know," Dohayan said quietly. "And she's learning love by watching us." She smiled, her heart swelling. "Then we'd better keep teaching well." As Amara grew older, their life took on new patterns. School mornings were filled with laughter and cereal spills. Evenings with homework and sleepy hugs. Weekends with paint on their hands, flour on their noses, and music that filled the kitchen. Yet in all the beautiful chaos, Dohayan and Jamapalai still found their sacred minutes. Sometimes after Amara slept, they'd sit on the balcony again, their quiet place, watching city lights flicker below. "Do you ever miss when it was just us two?" she asked one night. He smiled. Sometimes. But now, I love watching you be her mother even more than I loved you as just mine. Her eyes softened, the city lights glinting in them like stars. You say things that make my heart ache in the best way. Because it's still the same heart, he said gently. I just found new ways to love you through her. And she leaned against him, letting the quiet of their life, the soft hum of home, wrap around them like music. When Amara turned 10, they took her to Nairobi, Jumapali's homeland, for the first time. The sun was warmer there, the colors brighter, the air full of rhythm. Dohayan watched as Jumapali's face lit up, showing their daughter the places of her childhood. The markets, the mango trees, the river she once swam in. He realized then how much of her he had yet to know. Not the CEO, not the teacher, not the wife, but the little girl who had dreamed under African skies. That night, as they sat outside under a blanket of stars, Amara fell asleep on her mother's lap. Dohayan took Jumapali's hand and said softly, "You gave me soul. Now you've given me your world." She smiled, eyes wet with emotion. "And you gave me a reason to come back home, so she could see both sides of who she is." He looked at her, his voice tender. "Home isn't a place anymore, Juma. It's you and her. It's wherever love takes us." Years later, Amara became a teenager, thoughtful, kind, curious, with her mother's fire and her father's patience. One evening, she found an old notebook in a drawer, filled with notes from years ago. Across one page, in her father's handwriting, it said, she ran to them, laughing. "Appa, Amma, is this true? This is how you fell in love?" Jumapali laughed, leaning into Dohayan. "Yes, sweetheart. He was my shy student." Dohayan smiled, pulling both of them close. "And she's still my favorite teacher." Amara grinned. "Then maybe one day, I'll ask someone to teach me too." "When you do," Jumapali said gently, "make sure they learn not just to love you, but to honor you." And as their daughter smiled, Dohayan wrapped his arm around both of them, whispering, "That's the lesson we'll keep passing on." Years rolled by, and the home they built was filled with photos, laughter, and stories. Small pieces of their journey stitched into every wall. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low, Dohayan would find Jumapali sitting by the same window where their story began. He'd come behind her, just as he did years ago, and rest his hands on her shoulders. "You remember how it all started?" he'd ask. "How could I forget?" she'd say softly. "You asked me to teach you how to love someone else. And instead," he'd whisper, pressing a kiss to her hair, "you taught me how to love you, and everything that came after." Outside, the city would hum. Inside, the years would rest quietly. Two hearts that never stopped choosing each other. One child who grew up surrounded by love, and a story that proved some lessons never end. Because in their home, love wasn't a chapter. It was a lifetime, written in kindness, laughter, and the simple, sacred act of staying. The years, like gentle waves, carried their story forward. Gray began to touch Dohayan's hair, and faint lines softened the corners of Jumapali's smile. Yet, when they looked at each other, the same glow from their youth still lingered. Their love had aged like the seasons. Calm, sure, unshakable. Amara had grown now, a young woman full of warmth and promise. She stood on the balcony one morning, looking out at the sunrise with her parents beside her. "You two still hold hands like teenagers," she said with a grin. "That's how we remember we're still learning," Dohayan replied, squeezing Jumapali's hand. Jumapali chuckled softly. "Some lessons never end." Amara turned to them, her eyes bright with admiration. "If I ever find a love even half as beautiful as yours, I'll know I've done something right." Dohayan smiled, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "You will, my dear. But remember, beauty in love doesn't come from how it looks. It comes from how it stays." That evening, when the house had grown quiet again, Jumapali and Dohayan sat by the window where everything began. Where years ago, a shy young man had asked a confident young woman to teach him how to love. Outside, the same city lights blinked softly. Inside, Their hands were still intertwined. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "how one simple question changed everything?" "Every day," he said, smiling gently. "I asked you to teach me how to attract someone beautiful. I didn't know I was asking to spend a lifetime with you." Her eyes glistened, full of love that had seen decades. Laughter, tears, sleepless nights, the miracle of birth, the wonder of growing together. "You became more than my student," she said softly. "You became my peace." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, his voice a whisper against her skin. "And you became my forever." As night fell, Dohayan turned off the lights, and the city's glow filled the room. They sat quietly, listening to the sound of rain tapping softly against the window, the same melody that had followed every important moment in their lives. "You know what I love most about us?" Jumapali asked. "Tell me." "That we never stopped choosing each other. Not once." He smiled, his eyes full of that same tenderness that first captured her heart. "That's the secret, isn't it? Love isn't about finding someone once. It's about finding them every day." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And I'll keep finding you, Dohayan, until my very last breath." He rested his cheek against her hair. "And I'll keep loving you beyond it." Years later, when Amara stood by that same window, grown, strong, and with a family of her own, she could still feel them there. The air seemed to hold their laughter, their whispers, their love. She found her father's old notebook one day, its pages worn with time. On the last page, in faded ink, were the words, "Love is not something you master. It is something you keep learning together." Amara smiled through tears. She closed the book and looked toward the horizon where the morning light touched the sky, soft, golden, endless. "You taught me well, Appa. You too, Amma," she whispered. "I'll keep learning." And with that, the circle of love continued. Quiet, unbroken, eternal. Because the story of Dohayan and Jumapali wasn't just one of romance. It was the story of how love, once found, can grow with you, teach you, and stay long after words fade. A story that began with a question and ended with a promise that never truly ends. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also share and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.